Hello, 40 Waters. Longtime listeners of the show will know that I'm a big believer in education, especially music education, and I'm excited to announce that this episode is brought to you by TrueFire. I've partnered with TrueFire to bring you an opportunity to get into their lessons at an affordable rate in a way that's going to help you, help the podcast, and get you playing more guitar. I'm excited to say that you can use the code 40WATT, 40WATT, at checkout to get 40% off your first or next purchase through TrueFire. That includes their all access pass to have access to all of their lessons and videos and jams. I highly recommend it. I use it myself. I'm a huge fan. I truly believe in TrueFire's motto of live, practice, and play. Please use the link below to get started, and happy learning. This episode is brought to you by my Patreon supporters. There's a wonderful crew of people over on Patreon giving money every month to make sure that this show and this podcast happen and cut my overhead costs so that I can keep doing it. I can't express my thanks enough for their support and their belief in what we're doing over here. And if you'd like to join them and help support this podcast, you can do so by going over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast. For as little as $3 a month, you can support this show. And actually, now that we are starting to get sponsors for the episode, my $3 supporters will get the episodes ad-free. If you want to support at a $5 level, you'll get ad-free episodes and you will get additional content every week. I thank all of you that have given money to help keep this going, and I thank all of you that are going to become supporters and help make sure this show keeps happening. Thank you so much. 40 Waters, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Another episode. Yes, I know there's been a couple of weeks that have gone by without an episode. You know, life happens, y'all. That's the way this goes. I don't do this for a living. I wish I did. So if you want to help me do this for a living, you heard the whole thing about Patreon. You can go over to patreon.com/40wattpodcast and you can become a supporter of the show. The whole 9 yards. $3 a month gets you ad-free episodes. $5 a month gets you ad-free episodes and extra content. And then anything beyond that, we'll figure things out. If you want to get the highest level, we'll do lessons. I'll teach you guitar or bass or keys or music theory, or we'll just talk about life and the universe and everything. It'll be great. Fantastic. Anyway, go over there, check that out. That's not what I'm doing here. Thank y'all for being patient as life happens and I get real busy. And episodes don't come out quite as often as I want them to. But today I'm super pumped. So I've got Pete and Riley from Gecko Pedals. Gonna talk about the Geckoplex EP-5. We're gonna talk about the ambition of your first pedal being the most complicated possible delay pedal you could put on the market. I am a tape delay junkie, so there's a lot to unpack here. So Pete, Riley, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Philip.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to have y'all. So Riley and I have been talking on Instagram back and forth a little bit. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When the Geckoplex was released, it was immediately on my radar. So you know, that's just how I am with tape delay. I'll talk more about how I got into tape delay, but first I want to hear, what possessed. Like Riley and I talked on the phone and getting ready for this episode. We had a conversation and talked about the fact that, you know, most people, they start out with a 3-knob overdrive. Like that's how they get into making pedals. Like, oh, here's a fuzz pedal, 7 components. How'd you get into music? How'd you get into guitar? How'd you get into making pedals?
Oh, wow. How far back you want me to go?
Well, you know, at birth. No, I'm kidding.
So probably it really started between about 8 and 12 years old when my dad used to get mad at me for tearing everything in the house apart just to see how it worked. And, you know, after I did that and permanently ruined enough stuff, he just started picking up radios and things at garage sales or pawn shops and just here, next time you feel like destroying something, like take these apart.
Oh, that's cool.
So, yeah. So I got pretty familiar with electronic components and things like that at a pretty young age. Yeah, fast forward through the awkward, you know, pubescent high school ages, and I moved to Denver in, I want to say, what was it, 2006?
2006.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, about
Okay.
Which is
South
where I met
America, I think.
Pete. Um, musically, I wasn't born a musician. I got into it in, I'm late teens, early 20s, probably.
I can relate.
And yeah, so I didn't even take it very seriously until I moved to Denver and met Pete. And Pete had sort of a basement jam session going on like every Wednesday or Thursday. And that's really where everything started.
I gotcha. That's cool. Yeah, I started guitar late in life. I started my senior year of high school. So actually the latter half of my senior year of high school. So I can relate to the late start. I also took things apart, but I didn't learn to put them back together again. That's the problem.
That was always the hard part. I got better at that side of things.
Sounds like my experimentation when I was young.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah,
it
it's
apart, but never get it back together, right?
yeah, exactly. That
Find
was
out
that
how it
was
works, but
well, I think I just took it apart to look at the parts. I never really figured out how anything worked. And to this day, that's like I fixed a few amps and pedals over the years, but it's very much if I can go in and I can see the obvious problem, I can probably replace a part without having to know how this works, right? But yeah, once I start having to actually diagnose, I own a multimeter. I'm not great with it, but so you start playing music, um you start getting around. How does that lead to making pedals, making we're going to get to the Geckoplex too, because I've been playing this for a couple of days, and this is a wild experience. This thing it does a whole lot. So how did that lead into making, or at least conceptualizing, a tape delay?
All right. Well, so when Pete and I were in a band together back in Denver, he had an Echoplex. And I always just thought it was the coolest thing. It made noises that I had never heard before. And I just loved it. It was like this electromechanical just monstrosity that, it was just a kind of a captivating piece of gear. That's kind of why I thought it'd be nice to have Pete here, because if he hadn't had that, it never would have happened, really.
Yeah. So Pete, was that a
yeah,
DP2 or a 3? I'm always
it's
curious.
a 4.
Oh, really? I was going to say, or the
Yeah,
elusive
so
1, but no, it's not none of those
no,
things.
no, no. So I originally bought an EP3 in I want to say 2000,
Okay.
and I saw an EP4. This is back in the early days of eBay and stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, and I was like, I want one with the light bar on it, because the EP3's got to stick the screwdriver in to set the gain level.
Gotcha.
And I was
Okay.
like, okay, this one's got well, I've got it right here. It's got like a lot more options to it. You could set the gain with a knob on top that had a light meter to see when you're clipping or not. I was like, oh, I want that. So I bought both of them pretty quick. But back then they were not as far more affordable.
Yeah.
I'll say, than they are now.
Yeah.
But
And that was
yeah,
true up
so I
until
wound
not that
up
long ago.
right, and I wound up trading the EP3 for a lap steel long time ago. And of course, everybody wants the EP3, right? Because
Right.
it's got the magical preamp, and Riley can explain some of that stuff, but the EP4 I love, and it's mine. It's the one I've always kept, and it's the one that Riley really dug into for research on the Geckoplex. And yeah, we used it all through Nefarious Wayfarers, and I've had it all these years. It's a great piece of equipment, but it definitely has its, I don't know, its issues as well.
It's inconveniences.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
say the least. But
I
I
have
love
a
that piece of equipment.
yeah,
Anyways,
I
go
have a full tone tube tape echo, which is an EP2 style. with some tweaks
Yeah,
and
I loved when he
modifications.
came out with those, and then he came out with the solid state
Yep.
as well, which I was really fascinated with. And the old Echoplexes have, the slider on top. They would have
Mhm.
that kind of stick that would stick up the 3 and the 4. But the early ones just kind of had that little arrow you would slide, on the
Really?
front. It seemed like, and
Oh
is
yeah.
his name Mike? Is it
Yeah,
Mike
Mike. Yeah,
that
Mike Fuller.
ran Full Tone? I
Yep.
think Mike Fuller, and yeah, Riley was saying that he's closing down. I don't know if that's true or not, but
Yeah, so apparently
that,
he's at least the way it's worded, without getting way into the weeds on it, because he's put out a couple of things, but he's at least shutting down the day-to-day like full blown production in California. He's apparently
mhm.
moving to Tennessee. He says he's still going to make a few things, so I suspect there'll still be a few like
Yeah,
custom
probably like a
shop
little
style
custom shop
things.
thing.
Yeah.
Sure, right. Was he going to Nashville? It seems like a lot of California guys are heading for
Yep,
Nashville.
that's what he said. He's moving to Nashville, says he's
Yeah.
already bought a place. And when I bought the Full Tone, so I don't gig nearly now like I used to, right? There was the day, when I was playing 3, 4, 5 times a week. Most of them little blues gigs that didn't pay a ton of money, but
Mhm.
I was making a very bad living with a guitar in my hand, and I loved it. I was 20 something, and it was
Sure.
the dream, right? Whether I was on
Paying the
tour or just
dues, right?
exactly just playing in bars, I didn't care. I always wanted an actual tape delay ever since I saw the Black Crows playing with them, and they were playing with the Full Tone
Okay.
units too. And so,
Right.
of course, now that I'm not gigging, I have a stable job and can afford to buy one, so I bought one. You know how that
hmm
works. You
hmm
never have it when you want it and can use it a ton. But I bought it because it's the modern production. I'm going to put in air quotes. And it would be easier to service and easier to get parts for. And there's
I
a
heard
part
he
of me
built
that's
those things like a tank too.
yeah, he did. It's
Essentially, he,
overbuilt
he
compared
basically
to
reverse engineered and just took all the problems out of them. Essentially,
I'll say some
Go
of the
ahead. Sorry.
problems. He took a lot of the
Well,
problems
okay.
out of them.
Sure.
But yeah,
Right.
yeah. My worry, but now with him sort of closing down things, it's like, oh, great. Now this gets to be like the Echoplex, and it's hard to find parts for and hard to service.
Well,
And
tape alone nowadays is getting tough to find.
yeah, I
It
found
seems
a
like.
place in Chicago that I'm so remiss to even mention. But I was in Chicago for a couple of weeks back. My wife and I took a vacation. We went to see Ariel Posen at
Yeah.
Shuba's in Chicago. There's a shop called Rock and Roll Vintage. It is my new favorite music store, bar none, in the U.S. of any I've ever been to. Walked in and it looked like some like hoarder's garage, like a really big garage. But like
hmm
once you let your brain once you conceptualize the amount of stuff in the store, you start to realize,
Sure.
oh shit, that's two like OG JCM 800s. Oh, he's got 4 Hammond B3s in that shop. Oh, that's a high watt, whatever the model is that, the one everybody wants. Oh, that's a
Right.
Prophet synthesizer. It's like once your brain has a second to see everything, he had everything, like multiple tape delays. I was like, this shop's
And
ridiculous.
it's all just stacked on top of
Yeah,
one
yeah,
another.
all just stacked on top of
Just
each other.
randomly.
That's it.
Sure.
It was
Those
beautiful.
are some of the best shops.
Yeah. So walking through there though, you walk over to their counter and they've got a shelf full of tape from everything from like 1/2 inch to 1/8 inch tape. And I was like,
That's
I
awesome.
know where
Yeah.
I know where to find tape now because these guys are hunting it
Mhm.
down. Now I've got a huge spool of Memorex tape that I got when I bought my tape unit, so that I have some to
Yeah,
respool.
smart. Yeah.
So
Do you
I've got
wind your own cartridges?
I have learned how to do it out of necessity
Yeah,
because when
you need
one
to.
messes
Yeah.
up, you better learn how to wind it. And so I was actually
Yeah.
telling Riley what I've not had to do yet is completely retape one of the cartridges. I've had to respool it.
Mhm.
That's fine. I've not had to retape it. So I'm like, the day I have to actually splice it, I'm like, oh, this is going to be bad. This is going to be real bad.
Sure. Right. Nothing sounds like it though. Like nothing. And I think Riley's pedal has by far come the close in a, pedal board friendly pedal. And actually does what I consider the Echoplex does.
Yeah.
I know that there's several other manufacturers out there that are, it feeds back onto itself and this stuff. But, I would feed it back and then hit the slider just slightly, and it would just give this beautiful, spacey, thing,
Yeah.
and, I remember telling Riley, I don't see how you're going to do that with ones and zeros, like I don't see how that's possible.
You leave that to
And,
me.
of course he's like, he's the mad scientist, so he's always up for the challenge. And, and I think he knocked it out of the park. I really do. I'm fortunate to have one of the Geckoplexes and got to play around with it. And for somebody that's pretty familiar with original Echoplexes, it's the closest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, so Riley, talk about that for just a second because we talked about this on the phone. I personally think you're a masochist for deciding that this was going to be the first pedal you make.
I didn't know that it was going to be as crazy and involved as it kind of became. There's easier pedals to build, but the first and only really idea that I had for a pedal, I always kind of knew what it was going to be. It was just, how do I get there? And it took close to 15 years from the idea that we had one day to actually having it in front of me, because I was working a day job all those years, and so it was just sort of like this project up on a shelf that did a lot more collecting dust than actually getting worked on, because it was all just an hour here, an hour there when I was in the mood to work on it, and I didn't actually have full time 8 hours a day to hammer it out and get it going until just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming by a couple of years ago you mean about the time COVID shut us all down and we had nothing else to do.
It was that I was working a tech job during COVID, and I was really just kind of unhappy at that job. Just sort of, we got purchased by a much larger company that basically sucked the fun out of everything that we had when it was a small kind of personal company.
Yeah, that sucks.
And but nobody quits their job during COVID.
The Great Resignation, we called it, I think. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, so and so listeners, for those of you that have not checked this pedal out, seriously, go check it out. I'm hoping to have some videos out sometime soon talking about it too, because it's I actually, so with the day it came in, I did an Instagram live and was plugging it in and playing it, first sounds, first things I was doing. And I had a couple of my regular Patreon supporters and some of my regular Instagram folks who were live streaming and watching it. And literally, I think a couple of them planned to order it just because of the moving fader. I showed them, I started hitting the tap tempo switch and it started moving around. They're like, sold, done. I was like, you haven't heard it yet. I haven't even played. But it's one of those things that it's aesthetically it draws you in because it's so reminiscent, obviously, of the original Echoplex. But some of the nuance that you capture is really hard to do. Incredibly, you called it the warp knob. Some people call it a few other things in their tape delays. Yours feels like it does a combination of tape age and some other the mechanical idiosyncrasies of tape delay. That's an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things going on with that knob, and I wanted it to be able to do all of those things. So it's basically just a range. It acts very differently at say 3 different positions on that knob. If you turn it all the way down, it's basically almost just kind of digital. It repeats and just comes back sounding just like it went in and continues that way, basically indefinitely. If you turn it up
for me on that setting, by the way, for that setting, I'm I may as well have a DD3 at that point. I start turning it immediately. No, I need, this is the reason I want this sound.
Sure.
It's good that
But
it can
That's
do
the
it.
tape experience, you know. I
Exactly.
mean, a huge part of that, you know,
sure. But I
is
like to
the
give people the
mobile.
option at least of
Yeah.
having a cleaner sound.
Yeah, absolutely right.
I was
Because there are places of music for the DD3. You might as well have them all in one box. Why not?
Yeah.
That's
I was
tape
I was a little
inspired.
disappointed when I plugged it in and started playing that there's not a speaker built into it to give me the tape hiss of the motors running, so I didn't get the full experience. Because that's the other thing
I
about
think
tape
we even talked
delays,
about that a little bit, Riley. Like, oh, some people are going to be like, "Well, where's the hiss?"
Yeah,
right?
what's the
No,
hiss? And why
Oh,
doesn't
it's
it?
not authentic. I don't hear a bunch of hissing and
Why
popping.
didn't you try to exactly duplicate the preamp? And I'm like, just because you can do better. Like these were very noisy machines, that
yes,
And you know how guitarists and musicians could be like, "Oh, it's whatever." It's like, why don't you give it a whirl? It's lovely. You know what I mean?
I
So
mean,
it doesn't have to
I've
be
had
exactly
people
right, but it's darn close.
I've had people get, almost like what seemed like upset that I chose not to try to mimic the preamp. And they're like, I'm not gonna buy it if
yeah,
it doesn't have the preamp. And I'm like, have you heard mine?
right. And it's like, which preamp? Do you mean the EP2? Do you mean the EP3? What
EP4?
which preamp? Do you mean the Roland Space Echo, which has a totally different preamp? I did like the fact
Right.
that you added the gain knob. There is a preamp in there, and you can tailor it. I also love the fact that you have the option when you switch the pedal off, you can have it turn that off and be completely bypassed, or you can have it where that stays engaged, that gain function and that preamp is still engaged, which is part of it that I love. But I'm not married to any particular preamp. I just want a little something. That's the
Mhm.
thing I love about the tape echo I have. It gives a little something extra because I find that as I'm getting older, getting boomerish, I play with less and less pedals, and so it's like now I'm down to like I just want a gig with my I say less pedals. Y'all listeners, don't pretend that means less stuff, because I was telling Riley, like, I play with a super inconvenient rig now. I literally drag a 212 and a head, a rotating speaker cabinet. I have a Leslie Model 16, a tape echo, and a couple of drive pedals. And I'm like, it's not less stuff. It's just fewer pedals. But that's one of the things I like is that preamp is in there and it's pushing the amp a little bit, and the pedal does the same thing. It's really, really cool in that regard.
Sign up
There's
for
a reason that old big stuff sounded so good, man. You know what I mean? That's why you haul it around still. It's like nothing sounds that good. Everything's getting tiny and small, and that's great. I see the convenience of it, but nothing sounds like the real deal a lot of
Yeah.
times. So when somebody does come up with something that comes pretty darn close to it, it's really nice. So, but anyways, I see why you still drag that stuff around with you, you
Yeah.
know, because it sounds fantastic. The tone is nothing compares, right?
make sure to
But
join Philip's
anyways, sorry to
Patreon,
interrupt.
just so he can start affording a roadie to haul his stuff
Yeah.
around.
Oh, actually, the
Right,
chiropractor
sure.
bill is more expensive.
Right, that's it.
Yeah, I need a roadie because I'm not making any money playing these gigs. That's for sure. I'm playing blues
See, what you
cover
do is you
gigs.
get one of your fans to be like, "Hey, you want to help me out?" They're like, "Yeah, this is going to be awesome."
I need fans for. No, I'm kidding. But no, I it's
Please.
sort of like well, it's like for a long time, and still, I mean, I named this podcast after my like Till I Die amplifier. Super Reverb is my favorite amp of all
Hmm.
time. I don't let anyone help me carry that for a reason. I don't need to be liable for your doctor bills. It's the worst amp to carry. Yeah,
Is it original blackface or what?
it's a
What era are you
70 that
talking?
I've had converted to AB763
Okay,
circuit.
yeah.
Um, I
Hmm.
bought it. I bought it. I don't know, 17 years ago, and I played with it. It's my favorite amp. In fact, I was telling a friend of mine, actually telling Kyle, one of my Patreon supporters, I was telling him this is how I know that it's my like lifer amp, that it's tied to me forever. I don't count it when I count how many amps I have. Like I realized I did
Right.
it subconsciously. I didn't count it. I was like, I have too many amps. I have XYZ number of amps. And I was like, oh no, I have another one that I just didn't even think to count because that one never goes anywhere.
Well, why
It's not
count
gonna
it?
go.
That's the one that will never be sold, right?
That's
You know,
it.
so
That's
didn't
it.
even count that one.
Yeah. So, Riley, correct me if I'm wrong. You're a drummer, aren't you?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Your primary instrument is drums. So, not. I mean, you obviously play some guitar. You probably play a bunch of stuff like a bunch of musicians do. But
I play guitar at like a kindergarten level. It's, I mean, enough to test pedals out and things like that. But I mean,
He's like a modern day Jim Marshall, right? You know,
I'm probably one of the few
drummer
drummers
who
that
invented great amps. You know,
I'm probably one of the few drummers that
anyway.
does play through pedals, though. Like even
Yeah, that's true. You know, and I think that there's definitely a place for that.
yeah. Wait, you play drums through pedals?
With modern music, man, a lot of these youngsters and experimental people are playing through pedals, things you would never guess. You know what I mean? Like that friend of yours who's a harp player. Forgive me, I forgot her name, but
oh,
she's amazing. You know, I know it's a stringed instrument, but she does all this amazing stuff through pedals.
Oh,
You know,
Emily.
and you're just
Emily
like you
Hopkins.
would never.
yeah, Emily Hopkins.
Is that right? Right?
harp
Yeah,
player.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, and she's fantastic, and you're just like, but there's other examples too. Of course, keyboardists, been playing through for years, and talking about tape echo stuff like Benson Echo Rex, and and of course the Rolands and
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
There's a part of me that really, really wanted a Benson Echo Rec at one point, and then I looked up how much one costs, and I was
They're
like,
like $6,000 now.
it's dumb. It's so dumb. I was like, nope, Volante's fine.
Yeah, but if you want that sound, if you want that Pink Floyd sound, nothing sounds like it. You know what I mean?
You don't
It's
have
the
to
same
replace
thing
the
with an
tape on 'em.
Echoplex.
What was that, Riley?
Right, you're right.
You don't have to replace the tape on.
Yeah,
one.
it's a drum, right?
Yeah, it's a drum. Well, my thing
Right.
is, and this is blasphemous, and I'm going to lose listeners. I'm not a major Floyd fan. Like, I
You
like,
don't have to be. I mean,
yeah.
it's your taste, right?
Yeah, I like and respect them, but like for me, and I think that's why I gravitate to the Echoplex is for me, it's Zeppelin. For me, it's Jimmy Page.
Exactly, right, with Jimmy Page, right?
Yeah. And Jeff Beck. And I think Jeff
Heartbreaker
Beck
and all
was
of that stuff.
I think Jeff Beck was an Echoplex. He may have been.
I'm sure, I've heard Hendrix used one, Dwayne Allman, several other people. The guy that actually turned me on to is a guy named Ted Fry from here in Indiana.
Oh, wow.
And came from a band called Strawberry Larry, and one of my absolute favorite guitarists ever. And you could look up that band on YouTube and see some of Ted. Unfortunately, he wasn't playing through an Echoplex and that, but just I'd never heard anything like that in my life, And he's got this box up on top. He played through a twin reverb, and had this box up there, and I'm like, "What is this thing?" And it's got cables coming out of it, and I don't know. And I'd gone to see that band for years and become friends with them and stuff, and come to find out it was a Maestro Echoplex, and this is back in the '90s, And one day I was like, I want one of those, and that's when I kind of looked it up, and finally got one myself. And anyways, that's where mine started. Of course, I knew, because you can see it in Song Remains the Same, the movie and stuff, on top of Jimmy's amps when he's playing them with the theremin and all that crap, and doing this stuff, and he's got that echo plate. I think he used 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah, he did some crazy things. I tell people all the time that I use it like a glorified reverb. Like this, and that's the worst part. I think that's the worst part about the way I use it is like I've got this tube mechanical tape monstrosity sitting on top of my amp so that I can kick it on and just really be more like more reverb.
Well, it expands your sound, right? A little bit. And you can set those things like that. You set your sound the way you want. You don't always have to play like somebody else. You do your own thing, and you're like, hey, I want some more expansion in my leads or something, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's usually when I use
them
it.
any way you want. They still sound great, though. You know what I mean? And
yeah, like
Riley,
Riley, we were texting the other night, and I was telling you that I was trying to figure out like how to use the shift knob. because I was like running through its gamut, and it was like, man, when you go to the extremes, it gets wacky. But I was like, but then you were like, no, go subtle with it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I did, and now like just left or right or center, not by much, but just by a little, it adds that little bit of extra. I don't know. It's almost like it's, oh, you want imperfect? Here's the imperfect knob. Like if
But
you
it's in
want it
sync
perfect.
with your notes too.
Yeah. Yeah, but
So the
it
reason that
feels
shift
right.
knob, sorry, I think we're talking over each
No, I just say it feels right though, with just a little bit.
other. So it's pretty much Pete's fault that the shift knob exists in the first place. So I mean, he used to do this thing where he'd just go up to the Echoplex like in live performance, that's sitting on top of his amp, and he'd just play a note and then just start wiggling the delay slider on it, and he just got these crazy, just warped, twisted sounds out of it. And I was like, what if you could do that hands free? And just it would detect
Yes.
when you play a note and then just wiggle that thing. And that was sort of the idea behind that. And as far as I know, I'm the only one that's done anything like that so far.
Yeah, I like to believe I'm pretty versed in the tape style delays that are out there. Because I came to delay late. First of all, I was a hardcore look. I was the typical guy getting into. I'm from Clarksdale. I got into blues music. Then I got into, of course, Stevie Ray Vaughan. So I was like really into like Tube Screamer and wah pedal, and fuzz has been like a recent revelation to me, so we won't even talk about that. But and tremolo, I loved tremolo. Or if you're
Sure.
Leo Fender, vibrato, because he just didn't know because he's a mechanical engineer. But so I got into delay late, and the delay that broke it for me, that I suddenly understand, because I had, just like every other guy who learned guitar in the late 90s, early 2000s, I burned through DD3s and DD5s trying to understand
That was my
delay.
first delay as a
Yeah.
DD3. I love that pedal.
Oh, I do
It's a
now.
great pedal.
I think
It still is.
but I didn't get it. Didn't get it
Mm-hmm.
until Strymon released the El Capistan. And
Yeah.
I heard it, and it was a YouTube video. I heard it for the first time, and I
Mm-hmm.
immediately squirreled away the money to get it, working like, gigs, whatever I could, because it was the most expensive pedal I'd ever bought at the time. I think it was like
Yeah, I think
$319
$300
or
or
something
something.
like that.
Yeah.
And, but I loved that pedal, and that started.
I've heard great things about that pedal. That it comes really close to a tape. I've never owned any Strymon, but I've had several that are like it's you know close to a Echoplex or whatever. There's
It does
tons
it.
of manufacturers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely does a
And
thing. And I've had the Volante, and I've got the timeline still, because I do not as much now, but I do like show choirs and musicals and gigs like that. So I have to
Mhm.
have like a bunch of different delays. So the timeline does that. But tape has always been the thing. And I've always tried to go back to that. So hearing the Geckoplex next to like my tape delay, it's like I haven't tried them like A-bead yet. That's going to be my next thing.
Sure.
I'm gonna get the, because I have to drag it out, and I have to get a setup where I can easily swap back and forth between them, and I'm gonna do
Yep.
that and hear them back and forth, because I'm really curious. What I want to know, I don't expect it to be the same. I want, can I get my sound on my tube tape echo, and can the Geckoplex get me there or close by it? And I the more and more I play with it, the more I actually think it can, because it's got a. What we haven't mentioned is, it does tape delay great. It does a lot of shit. It does lots of things that we haven't even talked about. Like there's an expression knob,
It
there's
does way
MIDI.
more than an original Echoplex
Yeah,
does. That's for
there's
sure.
presets. Like I can't wait. I haven't done it yet, but because I haven't had a lot of time. But I think on Sunday, actually the day this episode comes out, I'm gonna plug in an expression pedal, and I'm just gonna put it on set it to the delay setting, and I am just going to go insane trying to make it sound as wild and wacky and weird as absolutely humanly possible. because
It's
you
a lot of
can.
fun, and using that expression pedal as a guitarist, it's you can do a lot with that, because like you said, you own the full tone there,
Yeah.
and you kind of, but with the expression pedal, I don't know, it's almost easier to control a lot of times. It takes a while to get it nailed, but you spent the time to commit to finding the right sound for it, and it's great. I really love the expression pedal for what I use it for.
Yeah.
But anyways,
No, I love it. I think there's so many great features that have gone into it. And so Riley, I've waxed poetic, and I've only had a couple of days with this thing so far. So hopefully I have at least a little while longer with it to really dig in and figure out what it does. And um but let's talk about just so you spend 15 years designing this pedal, roughly. I mean, I get that there were
Not
lots of lulls
constantly.
in that. Yeah, exactly. There are lots of lulls in there. That's sort of like I took the 10-year plan for my college degree, so I understand lulls. So um, it's just what it is, right? Um, so the big question now that I have to ask, even though I sort of know the answer, I'm assuming the plan is other things too, right? You're
Yeah,
planning on putting out some new stuff, doing some other things.
I definitely am. I'm not quite there for the
Uh
next
huh.
one. Well, actually, I have built a second pedal. It's it's right here. It's amazing. It's it's just a little buffer I threw together in like an
Yeah, it's
hour.
a buffer switch. Yeah. I knew it had to be something just that simple. But so that's awesome. That's what I was going to ask. Like, you got to follow this up because it's funny. I was, in learning settings and learning this thing could do. I do what a lot of us do now. I go to YouTube and like, okay, who's already done a few demos of this, right? And I didn't realize until somebody asked me, this thing's already on V2. I have the V2 version of it. The V1 didn't have MIDI. Is that what the biggest differentiation is?
That and a lot of people really wanted it to be able to be fully bypassed. Those were probably the
Gotcha.
two main things that people uh, sort of took issue with was that the preamp was always on the V1. There was no way to switch it off. That was sort of a deal breaker for a lot of people. Now it's an option whether you want to
Yeah.
fully bypass it or
I thought you did a bunch of new stuff on the V2. When you were explaining it to me,
yeah. There's
and
more than that. It also has MIDI. You can fully
looper.
MIDI control it. It has higher headroom. The noise floor is lower. There's a lot of things.
Yeah.
If on the website on the V2 page, there's a little list that says everything that's sort of
You can adjust the timing. I don't have a V2, but you can adjust the timing.
yeah. You can change the max
You can make it more like an original Echoplex. So
delay.
whatever that was, 680 milliseconds or something, all the way up to his original 2 seconds or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, you really did a bunch on V2.
Yeah, it's got a lot of quality of life features you'd want something like this to have. And
Mhm.
I sent a picture to the Discord for this podcast. By the way, if you're into Discord, hang out in our Discord. There's just a bunch of us over there talking about gear pretty much all the time. We're a lot of gear pushers. We encourage each other to buy things a lot. I apologize for your wallet. But anyway, come on over there. So I posted a picture and someone said, that pedal's huge. And it is. It's a big pedal. Like I compared it, I put it on top of my timeline. I'm like, yep, it's just a touch bigger than the
I mean, it's
timeline.
pretty much the exact same size, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
As the
really,
timeline.
really
I mean,
close. And it's like, yeah,
uh,
it does one thing, but oh my God, it does that thing. That's the thing. Because if you're like me, like in my day-to-day gigging, like in the music I make, the music I like to gig, that's all I need. I need this delay sound. I don't need the 400 bajillion that the timeline does in the music I like to make. That's you hired me to play guitar and I need to mimic a part kind of pedal.
Well, so a lot of people will have a few different delay pedals for different purposes, but when you can have them all in one, okay, you might have 2 or 3. I think 2 is pretty common.
Yeah.
But this is one. It takes one 9-volt jack. That's it. Out of your power brick, and this thing you can make it sound almost like Bucket Brigade. All the way to spaceship tape stuff. You know what I mean? And it's everything in between. It seems like, and especially with V2. I mean, that thing's got everything now.
I like the reverb on board too. The reverb's really nice. And I have to tell you, I'm going to tell you thank you, because I was curious if I could, and I did. I turned the volume of the repeats all the way down, and I could just use the reverb without any of the repeats of the delay, it's a nice addition. It's not something like I'd go in and think, oh, that's a feature that's going to make me buy it, but I like that it's there and that it exists.
You can use it as reverb only too if you want. So in addition to Echoplexes, I was also a fan of the RE201, and like I had an RE20, the pedal board version of an RE.
Still valid even with the new Boss pedals. That's still a super valid pedal.
It's a great pedal. Pete sold me his. He had one way back when we were both in Denver, and he's like, I'm getting rid of this pedal. Does anybody want it? Or otherwise I'm putting it up on Reverb or whatever. And
Reverb was around.
Yeah, it might not have even been a thing. eBay or
I'm gonna put it up on Craigslist.
Yes, yeah. No, I was so glad you bought that, because I always liked the pedal, but I was looking for Echoplex in a pedal. And the Roland Space Echo isn't quite that. I always think of all the reggae albums and stuff like that came, but those had a reverb unit in it, spring reverb.
Yeah, so getting back to being a drummer, like basically the two things you want as a drummer mostly is delay and reverb, because then you can do reggae, dub style kind of sounds and things like that. There's not that many other effects that are super useful to a drummer, but delay and reverb are definitely appeal to me. And I really wanted the pedal that I was building to have a reverb, so I could have just sort of a all-in-one thing for my kit, and not.
Yeah,
it's still a hall reverb, correct?
Is
it a hall?
It's kind of a hall chamber style reverb, more or less.
Okay. And I appreciate that, because this is still me saying, look, I know we've come so far in DSP, and we might want to talk about that here in just a second, but we've come so far in what digital can do. I still hate digital spring reverb. I hate every one of them. I've yet to hear one I like. It doesn't exist. It doesn't sound like spring, but DSP does a great hall or room. Those sound fantastic to me, which is what spring was trying to sound like to begin with, if you really think about it. So it's like,
right.
I appreciate that you did not try to mimic a spring reverb, because I probably hate it.
I'm not a fan of spring reverb. I had an actual real spring reverb, and I did not like the sound of it. I didn't think it sounded natural. It sounds like a bunch of rattling springs, which is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm personally a huge fan. Like Fender reverb, I love that sound. I mean, I don't like the ultra surf splash, swamp splash stuff, but dial in a little. Oh gosh, I love that sound.
I do. Well, Fender amps also can get too much way too fast, and I feel like
a lot of the, no argument there.
A lot of the digital emulations get too much way too fast, and some of them sound too springy. They try too much to sound like springs, and I'm like, no. The good spring reverbs, the good ones, you get to forget there's springs in there for the most part. If they're good.
I'd always heard like those big reverb tanks, like the 5 springs, with the long springs. If you take 2 of them out, it really dials that in nice. But I don't know, something I'd never experimented with it personally, but I'd always heard that makes a big difference.
Me either. I'm not a tinkerer
regardless
anymore.
We can talk about reverb. I always did like the Holy Grail though from Electro Harmonics. Had one of those for a while, and I always liked it.
That wasn't a bad one, but like I said, Fender amps have been where I came from. Super Reverb's the amp I've had for the longest. I've never needed reverb. That's the thing for me. It's like I usually have it in amps. I have a couple of amps that right now that don't have it, and therefore I don't play those amps as much, even though they sound great. And so it's like there's a part of me that's like, oh, I should keep them because they have this sound. And then there's a part of me that's like, are you going to gig that amp? Are you going to actually take that amp out and play it? Because if not, why do you have it?
Well, like the great Danny Gatton, I think I read once, he said, because he played through one of those old basements. It didn't have reverb, right? And they're like, you don't have reverb on this. He's like, you play loud enough, you don't need reverb. You know? But of course, Danny played so loud, he'd melt your ears, you know? Apparently. I never got to see him live.
Yeah, I never saw him live. So, but yeah, so the other thing about effects on drums, though, I've learned so much by watching that pedal show and watching Nick over there and like the stuff he does on drums.
Oh, that show's great.
I've learned that Rat on a snare drum sounds amazing.
Huh.
So you may have to give that a try.
I'll try that.
Okay.
Yeah, just put some grit on a snare drum. Well, you know, back my undergraduate degree was in music and audio engineering. I did like a split degree, right? I did way more music, way less audio engineering, because I actually learned in the process of working on a degree in audio engineering that this is going to sound so awful. I hate working with other musicians who have all these like weird ideas of the way things should be done. And I'm like, no, stop. Microphone on the thing. They're like, well, I heard if you turn it the right direction on a full moon when the sun is like, no, stop. Just microphone.
You sound like an outstanding sound man. You know?
It's one of those things where I'm like, look, I'm going to make the sound you give me sound better and louder. But please don't tell me about whatever it is that the witch doctor that you bought snake oil from tells you is the way that things work better. Like, so I realized
you know how guitarists can be, or musicians.
I know
it's
sometimes
awful. You know what I mean?
Awful.
They get so. Anyways, I don't.
Yeah, we get weird. We get real weird, and so it's one of those things. It's like I realized real quick that I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this for a living. I don't. So I took way more music classes and music theory and music history, but I learned.
I'll tell you what a huge difference a good sound man makes, though. Oh my gosh, so many people don't even.
Oh,
I don't want to say they don't consider it. A lot of bands can't afford a great sound man.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was at a show, a tribute show. A friend of mine passed away a couple years ago, and we have an annual concert for him, and the sound man there was just fantastic. I mean, he made everybody sound so just so great. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go on a tangent on that, but man, what a great sound man is.
It makes sense.
It's just unexplainable.
And
really
honestly, my barrier for good sound man is so low at this point because what I've gotten in the past, I'm like, is he looking at me when I ask for more monitor? Like, if they're just looking my direction, or is he at the bar, like, just chatting away? Like, as long as he's actually looking at me, hey, you're a good sound man. I don't care what your ears are.
Yeah, you're at least paying attention to, hey, turn up the mic, hey, you know.
Or if we just didn't have constant feedback on stage the whole show. Like, I'll set the bar just that low.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I've seen those guys too, man. Oh, just atrocious. They shouldn't even be near controls.
No,
you know what I mean. Like,
and as someone who's been a sound guy, I was a sound guy at a place called Ground Zero Blues Club. It's in Clarksdale. If people have heard of it, it's because Morgan Freeman was a part owner at one point. I don't know if he still is. I need to check into that. But and that's the bar I've played the most over the years too, because it's my hometown bar. But like
hometown bar,
yeah, I'd have guys in there who are, you guitar players, listeners, those of you that are so hard on sound guys, you should be a sound guy for a couple of nights and also deal with guitar players. And like, I'd have these guys in who, don't get me wrong, I love them. They're great guitar players. Some of them, if I said names, you might even know who they are. But I'd have them in, and I'm like, guys, this club holds like 175 people. Like, this is a tiny place. I'm going to need you to turn.
You don't need a half stack?
Yeah, take your twin off of 10, please, For the love of God, turn it down. It's not that I don't want you to sound good. I do. I want you to sound amazing. But you're hurting me, and I literally can't get the monitor louder so that you can hear your vocals. It's not possible. Like I'm already cranking everything. It's one of those things too where it's like, guitar players, be mildly considerate of your sound people. You'll know the bad ones. Trust me, you'll know the bad ones. But it's like, I'm not
Good sound
telling you to
man
be.
will make you sound better than you ever have before. I
That's it,
mean,
100%.
it's really unbelievable. I mean, what a quality sound person can do for you, you know. And
Yeah.
anyways,
Riley. I had Jesse from 29 Pedals on the podcast a few weeks ago,
Oh,
and
nice.
he's also a drummer, audio engineer, has great ears. We got to talking about the way people mic drums and the whole like putting it in the hole rather than just miking the head. And it's like, look, back it up. The hole does not mean you have to put the mic there. The 80s taught you that. That's not right. Like, get it where it sounds the best. We've had this conversation about live sound engineering, and it's like, I watch way too many engineers get on stage. They flash their light in the cabinet, and they figure out where the cone is, and they point the microphone exactly where they think it sounds best, but not once do they listen to it. Like, they're like, oh, this amp sounds best like this, because this is how I mic every cabinet and every guitar player, regardless of what they sound like. Stop. Please use your ears to listen to something. He said he had a really good point, and I wish I had known this when I was doing this more for a living, because I did the same thing he was talking about. He said, I wish they would stop sound checking the individual instruments. Like, don't get up there and just hit the bass drum and then just hit the snare drum. He said, if they're going to do it right, what they ought to do is get the whole band up there and tell them to just jam, play something, and let me get levels. Because that's what it's going to sound like. Because, Pete, you've probably dealt with it a ton. You get up there to play guitar, you play a couple of notes, and the sound guy, before the band has even started playing, it's like, yeah, you're going to have to turn down.
Yeah, you hear that all the time. I agree with that. You know, on some of that, you know, it's like, hey, you know, 1, 2, 3, check. Okay, yeah, the microphone does work. But, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. I always thought, why didn't the whole band play and you just dial it in off that? You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I'm not a sound guy, so.
Yeah.
But I couldn't agree with you more, you know.
It's a thankless job, and it's like being an umpire in baseball. When you're good at it, everybody hates you anyway. When you're bad at it,
or doesn't notice you.
Yeah, or doesn't.
When you're good at umpire at baseball, you're not noticed.
Yeah.
You know.
Or but if you're bad at it, everybody hates you anyway. So it's like, it just is what it is.
You know, I'm a baseball fan, so
yeah,
some
I
of
know.
them deserve to be.
I love baseball, and I realize.
But there's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, I realize, listeners, that not all of you are into baseball. It's fine. Just look up Angel Hernandez. You'll understand.
Who gets rated high all the time, by the way? I didn't think we'd talk about baseball here, but
no,
you know,
why?
apparently.
I'm not going to go way down this rabbit hole, but why? I watched a guy strike out on 3 straight balls. I don't understand. Anyway, I digress. We're going to come back. We're going to come back to music before I get really worked up, because we're getting close to postseason baseball and postseason.
That's a different show.
Yeah, I tell my I have friends who are really into baseball, like really, really, really into baseball. And I'm like, look, I love baseball, but I watch for the first week of the opening of the season, and then I start paying attention again at the end of September, because that season's way too effing long. 180. Nobody should play.
Nothing like playoff baseball, though. That's for sure, and that's the last baseball thing I'll say.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I digress. So I've been super pumped to dive into this pedal and play it. I can't wait to get my tape delay out and try it out, because the other thing is just the pure and simple maintenance of it. I think Ryan on Demos on the Dark mentioned it. He's like, he said, I have an Echoplex, but it's in the shop. because it's always in the shop.
Right.
He did say that on his demo. I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty fun.
I really like that guy's videos too. I've only checked out a few of them, and man, his tone is beautiful on his videos. I don't know, you video guys, I don't know how you guys get all this dialed in.
Well,
So
I'm still learning it. So
man, whether he plays through one of those boxes or whatever, I'm sure he does. But man, his tone is killer.
Yeah, I
great
have,
videos too.
I have the Captor
Great
X.
concept.
I like it a lot. Yeah, Ryan, I've had him on the podcast. Super great guy, great tone. But like, I really watched his demo a bunch on the Geckoplex to figure out how he was using the shape knob or shift knob. Sorry, shift.
You know what,
right.
Riley? I'm not even sure I knew he made one yet. I think we talked about it that he was going to, but I'm not sure I've seen it yet.
Yeah, it's out on YouTube.
I've seen Mike Herman's and I've seen Andy's.
Yeah,
but I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, Ryan did one too. It was a great video.
And so it was one of those things where it's like, so this is where we talk about this because this is unpopular to talk about, but it's like some people see it and they think, oh, expensive pedal. It is expensive. There's a lot of work, y'all. If you held this thing and you played it, you'd understand there's a ton of work. It's big. I'm going to use air quotes, listeners. It does one sound. All of y'all stop that shit. Because how many of you own 17 drive pedals that all just sound like a tube screamer? I'm just going to stop there. I had a revelation recently. I had a buddy of mine, Scott, loaned me a bunch of pedals that I didn't have, had never played through, a bunch of drive pedals. And I started plugging them in. I'd play a few things. And I was like, okay. I swapped the pedal. I was like, did I swap the pedal? And then I plugged in another one and played. I was like, did I swap the pedal? Because it was like, all of y'all play one sound anyway. So stop. Sorry, that's my saltiness for the day. I'm done. I'm better now. Anger's gone. But it's, so you get this thing. It's expensive. It's big. It does one thing. But you know what? When it came out, I noticed a whole bunch of YouTubers had it in their best of 2021 list. I've noticed more and more people talking about it. And it's one of those things where as a YouTuber or bad YouTuber, because I don't put stuff out on YouTube enough, I don't trust YouTubers. I need to hear it for myself. It's one of those things, I get it. And I just having played it the last few days, I'm pretty much sold on it. I need to compare it to my actual unit, but there's a part of me that's like, I could maybe sell my tape delay and not use it anymore, because the idea of keeping that thing taped for the next X number of years sounds awful.
Yeah, I've had a ton of guys that bought one pretty much just because they were tired of servicing their tape machine.
And guess what? It's not that big, in my opinion. If you're working with one of these tiny little micro pedal boards, I mean,
there's a lot of stuff in it too.
I mean, it's smaller than a deluxe memory, man, and those things are, you know what I mean? It's to me, it's kind of like 3 of the smaller pedals, together, and you basically only need one delay with this unit. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
And
no, especially
got all the presets.
That's the big
does
deal.
A billion things. I mean, and I mean, for sure, if it's too big for you, you don't have to get one. But I think if you want something as close to a real Echoplex that will actually fit on your pedal board, I mean, try to put an Echoplex on there. Let me know what you think. But it's
real talk. Or
I think it's perfect. I have an old trailer trash board. I mean, it's probably, I don't know, if you remember those, but
that's a company I haven't heard
in a while. It's not one of these huge, long rectangle suitcase. I don't need 10 billion things. For forever, I've used an overdrive, a wall, a phase pedal, and my Echoplex. Of course, I use this, now, and then sometimes I use a compressor, but very rarely. I usually use some kind of boost, and the most important pedal, a tuner. You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And so I've been super pumped to check it out. I'm super pumped to play a little more, get some videos done. I've got to get through a work thing that's got to get me through October, but October's is coming, listeners. We'll get more consistent after October. I y'all don't want to hear about my real life job. Yeah, but it's stressful right now. I'm getting through it. Um, so uh, I'm super pumped to check it out. I think my listeners should check it out. I think if you haven't, go check out some demos. There's a bunch out there. Like we've mentioned, there's the Ryan from Demos in the Dark. There's the Andy Demos, I think is what he goes by now on YouTube. Andy Martin,
Mhm.
I
formerly
first
Pro Guitar
suggested
Shop, as I
him
found him.
right, and if anybody is into gear, and I mean, not everybody's as old as I am, but I remember when that came out, and I always loved his videos. You know what I mean? He was like the first one, and I tell Riley, I said, "Hey, I don't remember his last name, but I was like, there's this guy Andy, and I was like, I think he lives in Portland, and he used to do these great videos, And Riley reaches out to him, and I don't know the man personally, but fortunately, Riley knows him. He's like pretty well now. But,
he's a bonkers player. It doesn't make any sense to me. He doesn't use a pick.
Yeah, I mean, he plays with his fingers. Yeah. Super tasty player, but he was the first guy ever to come out with those like, hey, this is what this. Before you had to go down to Guitar Center or wherever and plug it. Oh, I want to try this or I want to try that, and you didn't really want to. You weren't in your own atmosphere to feel comfortable enough or to play through it long enough or whatever.
Do you remember
so you
when
might walk out of there. What happened with that rolling pedal?
Do you remember when
Go
you
ahead.
had to get a CD of sounds from a company or in a magazine to hear what pedals sounded like?
In the magazines. Yeah, they would play. You put them on your little, and it's just like, I've got this great Fender book about Fender amps, and I think it's Greg Koch in there. And he narrates this whole, and he goes through every era, but it's a CD in the back, and you would put it in, and you'd be like, hey, this is what a 67, or whatever, super, not a 67, but the old super, before they became super reverbs, what I mean? The super amps. And stuff, but he went through everything. Hey, this one old champ sounds like so he'd listen. It was great, but it was the closest thing you had instead of spending,
Yeah, and I learned I took up guitar in 99, senior in high school, and so it was late for me, and so I got like the very beginning of the whole like YouTube thing, and then then ignored it entirely. It was just that's what it was.
It's almost become a lot now, there's so much to choose from to view. It's almost too much, Yeah.
So social media in general has started to become too much for me, but that's a whole other ball game to talk about.
I don't really.
It's a conversation in itself.
Yeah. So
yeah, no doubt, but
it may be.
Yeah, I think a lot of the guys that are producing videos of Riley's pedal, have done a fantastic job.
They're great,
and some of those guys, I really love. Mike Herman from Pop It to the Chemist. Man, that guy is fantastic. I love his flow and the way he plays. I don't know him. I have never seen that band. But just off these videos and the way, I mean, his demos alone, but if you look up like Pop Into the Chemist and some of these guys, man, just beautiful tone, beautiful musicianship, just the flow of it. I come from the jam band where I love all music, but, but man, that guy is just special, anyways, I just think a lot of these demo folks, have done a fantastic job with the Geckoplex, and Riley's pedal.
Well, I tell you what, that may be a conversation that we need to continue over on the Instagram. Oh my gosh, brain, Philip. Over on the Patreon portion of the podcast. So listeners, want to thank y'all for hanging out with us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all of the support you give. Remember to go over to all of the social media things while I'm ranting about social media. Instagram, Facebook, Discord, if you're into it. You can find all the links below. You can also find the links for the website and the link tree. That'll give you all the other links. Hey, I heard you liked links, so I put links in the links. It's stupid. So appreciate y'all hanging out. Go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast. Where you can support this podcast and get extra content like the episode we're about to record right after we follow up with this. In the meantime, Pete, Riley, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate y'all.
Thank you,
Good to
Philip.
be here.
Yeah. And listeners, until next time we meet, remember, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.